Why are summers at the Shalom Hartman Institute so special?
Because that's when Jewish leaders and learners like you and me travel to Jerusalem to wrestle with big ideas and study with Hartman's inspiring faculty.
The Shalom Hartman Institute is a pluralistic think tank and educational center for the Jewish people.
Our scholars draw on 3,000 years of Jewish wisdom to develop the ideas we need to face today's challenges.
This summer, the pandemic has prevented us from traveling, but it doesn't prevent us from learning together. Welcome.
Join hundreds of Jewish leaders for All Together Now, a month-long celebration of ideas from the Shalom Hartman Institute. From now until July the 23rd, come learn with us in this moment of crisis and opportunity.
Hello, Shalom. My name is Shira Levin. Welcome to the intensive Beit Midrash with Rabbi Tamar Elad-Appelbaum on intervention in times of crisis, on moral and spiritual leadership. I am a rabbinical student in the third cohort of the Beit Midrash for Israeli Rabbis that is a joint program of the Shalom Hartman Institute here in Jerusalem and the Midrasha in Oranim in the Galilee. Our Beit Midrash brings together, once again in history, the Galilean and Jerusalem Torah study. Our program ordains rabbis who come from all backgrounds, denominations, and affiliations, and are active in all walks of Israeli public life and communal service in ruach, study, and civil action. We are now in the midst of a very special week, launching our Beit Midrash outside as a nationwide network, connecting rabbis and spiritual leaders all around Israel with each other and turning outwards to engage others. This week's theme is Anochi Ervenu, that emphasizes the tremendous responsibility of solidarity and obligation we hold for each other, all varied tribes of Israel. This learning session is part of All Together Now, Jewish Ideas for This Moment from the Shalom Hartman Institute. The Shalom Hartman Institute is a pluralistic think tank and educational center for the Jewish people. We are excited to have more than 6,000 people registered for this month-long celebration of ideas. That includes more than 1,000 rabbis, 900 educators, and 700 Jewish community professionals. We're also hosting major learning programs for teenagers and college students. Here are a few things we need to know before Rabbi Tamar starts teaching. We encourage you to submit your questions in the Q&A feature of this webinar throughout her lecture. Rabbi Tamar will pause to take questions during this intensive Beit Midrash. Tamar and our production team are the only ones who can see what participants write as questions. Rabbi Shraga Baon will help with the questions. This session will be recorded and should be available within 2 days. If you haven't already, you can easily access the sources for this session on the same page that you used to open this Zoom link. At the end of the session, you will be invited to complete a survey about your experience. We thank you in advance for taking the time to share your feedback. I'm happy to introduce Rabbi Tamar. Rabbi Tamar is co-founder of the Beit Midrash for Israeli Rabbis. Rabbi Tamar founded Zion, an Eretz Israeli congregation in Jerusalem. Her work spans and links tradition and innovation, working towards spiritual and ethical renaissance. She devotes much of her energy towards the renewal of community life in Israel and the struggle for human rights and dignity. She has served as rabbi of Congregation Magen Avraham in Omer in the Negev, as a congregational rabbi in New York suburbs alongside Rabbi Gordon Tucker, and as assistant dean of the Schechter Rabbinical Seminary in Jerusalem. In 2010, Rabbi Tamar was named by the Forward as one of the 5 most influential female religious leaders in Israel for her work promoting pluralism and Jewish freedom. I am privileged to be one of Rabbi Tamar's many students here in Israel and around the world. In the Bet Midrash for Israeli rabbis, we have the weekly opportunity to listen deeply to Rabbi Tamar's unique teachings. I find memorable one of Rabbi Tamar's Torah teaching, a midrash about Erev, this evening. It is now 7 p.m. in Jerusalem. Evening is enveloping the holy city. Erev is a liminal time of in-between, already not day, not night yet, a time of uncertainty, of concern, even anxiety. In this tender time of Erev, it is a mitzvah for us all to be arevim ze lezeh, to vouch for one another, to virtually hold each other's hands, saying, I'm here for you. We will traverse this time of uncertainty and concern together until we can meet again next summer, Bezrat Hashem. Without further ado, the microphone goes to Rabbi Tamar for the rest of this Erev. Thank you.
I want to say that for me, this was the most beautiful part of the evening to hear you.
Toda lach.
Toda and shalom, everyone. I wish we would be sitting together, but we are sitting together. And I hope that from here I can send you my care, my worry, my hopes, my prayer, and also my gratitude that we take this time together, all together. I would like to open Bichvoda shel Achsania and first thank Hashem for giving us life, and thank our neshama and our body for being here and being healthy, and thank the strength that we found in ourselves for us and our beloved and our communities and others, and also to thank for the times when we couldn't and we allowed ourselves to be supported by others, to be vulnerable, to thank friendships and partnerships, and to thank leadership of so many who are now in this session studying together, leaders at their best. To thank all of you who reach out every day, day after day, for such a long time, to give a hand and a heart for so many in such uncertain, trembling days for all of us. And I want to thank this Achsania of Anochi Erevenu, Rav Daniel and Yehuda and all the Hartman leadership, and Rabbi Lauren, and Tali and Levi and Marlene, and the photographers Michael and Dani, and my friends in the Israeli Rabbinic Bet Midrash, all the leadership. Today is a very special day for us. As Shira said, we opened today the doors of our Israeli Bet Midrash LeRabbanut Israelit, to all teachers and friends all around Israel, from all streams and all denominations and beyond denominations, to come together and create the network of Israeli rabbis who are different. Yet our goal is to work together for the common good of all the people here. In this first night of our program, I can't think of a better blessing than joining together with sisters and brothers and leaders from all around the world, the Jewish spiritual leadership, and receiving your blessing as we build a bridge of solidarity and care made of rabbis and leaders from all around Israel and all around the world. Shraga said something beautiful today, one of my partners and co-founders, that every time we put this masecha and we guard ourselves and we guard other people, we should say a bracha, al ha'arvut, on solidarity. And I want to say this bracha to all of you now, wherever you are, a blessing for solidarity. Al-Arvut. And I also want to thank the Torah. Rabbi Nachman says that Torah and Tefillah teach us to breathe. That's all they wanted to teach us. The words are there in both of them so we could breathe between the words and learn how to do it. And the Zohar teaches that breath comes from a heart that is wrapped by lungs. Our heart is wrapped by 2 lungs, and that our lungs are like a set of 2 wings, guarding the heart. And every time we breathe, teaches the Zohar, we actually open our wings and they fly across all zooms and across all floods, and they land in your office or in your house where you now study Torah with us, or on the shoulder of an elderly person in one of the homes of our planet, or on a bed in a hospital in the world. And so every time we breathe, every time we learn Torah, every time we pray, that dove of ours coming straight from our heart, those two wings that wrap and envelop our heart, those lungs, they give strength and support to others. Breath is that transparent wind of unconditional care. It's generous, but it's even more than being generous. It's committed, it's vowed to meet all parts of our being, humans being, all creatures beings. And so when we study, we send breath to each other like a big respiratory human machine. And I invite you, if you want, in the Q&A, to dedicate this study to whoever you wish to send your wings to, tonight in Israel, or in any time where you're at right now, through your breath. It could be your elderly parents, or children, or community members, or those who are bereaved, or those who lost jobs, or those who just feel the anxiety of this time, insecurity. And only if you feel comfortable to write, so we can hold this space, this sacred space of respiration together. Torah too is a dove, not only our heart, but Torah itself. Torah comes from the word torim, doves, who are always in pairs, always in twos. And the Torah teaches us for generation. She's our teacher, our light, our oraita, our torch, that what humans need is connection. She was there at the flood, on Noach's windows of the ark. That Torah, that dove, seeing how the world is saved through two, through always a pair, through connection, always. Connection of different sorts. It could be a daughter and her mother. It could be two brothers. It could be a teacher and his pupil or her pupil. Two friends. Torah knows for generations of our human sickness called egoism, of the me malady that turns the other to be our instrument or turns them to be our threat or our burden. And she hands us remedies like solidarity, hope, love, kindness, care, responsibility, whispering to us that our redemption is when we turn our attention from ourselves to the other. That we do that through the transparent other, Hashem, the Kadosh Baruch Hu, and through Hashem, God, the divine, we find ways to train ourselves to see the other. Through him or her, all others. One of the things I learned in this Corona time is how right the Torah is, how much we need each other to be in contact and connection, how I need people to guard me, how they need me to guard them, how I need them to ask me how I am, and they need me to hear how they are, and I want to hear how they are. And I learned that I was too polite before Corona. And due to Corona, I actually became less polite. I know I'm Israeli. It might not be, too much for some of you. But I did become, due to the Corona, and thanks to the Corona, less polite. I ask people now questions that I never did before, and in ways, blunt ways sometimes, but delicate, that I never did before, about money and how they're doing, and about domestic violence, and about anxiety and loneliness, health. Maybe with the mask on, everything is less aesthetic. And when things are less aesthetic, I could ask less aesthetic questions. And even intervene and interfere. We need each other. We need someone sometimes to intervene into our life and ask something. And ask how we really are. And if we need help. And say when he sees something is wrong. And intervene. A year ago, I was walking out of an institution that I know. When I saw a man yelling at a woman, it was clear that they knew each other well. He became violent, more and more violent as they spoke. His car was stopped and he was blocking everyone with his car. Everyone was looking at the car, not seeing him, not seeing her, while she was afraid. All around, drivers were honking. No one had time. She was paralyzed and she was afraid, but no one had time. What do they know about her? What can they do? No one had time. I went into my car. I was parked very close. What should I do? I don't know her. I don't know him. I'm not a police person. I'm not a psychologist. I took my phone and went out to him and to her together with one more man who came with me. As we approached, she fled. It was a good moment for her to just leave. And then we approached to him and we said, you know, many people see you now, all around you. It must be very uneasy to be so angry, so publicly. And it maybe would be best for you to take a moment to calm down and not do anything you would regret later. And he yelled and threatened us, and he hit the cars, and finally he left. After that, I went to speak with the director of that institution, and later that day I was called to the police to testify. Who am I? Who am I to interfere like that? The real question is, who am I not? Who am I not to interfere like that? I'm a human being. When another person is in need, she needed help. And out of all the many people who were there, 2 people, that man and me, we came out of our cars. The others were on their phones. They didn't even see. And like them, so did I. 1,000,000 times before that, I didn't see. I didn't want to see. What to do, how much to do. It's not my story. I don't really know the story. Shakespeare asks the question to be or not to be. That is not the question of the Torah. The question of the Torah is not to be or not to be. The question of the Torah is to see or not to see, to say or not to say, to intervene or not to intervene. Who will you be, she asks me. Who will I be? Who will we be? Ayeka, ech. It's about the installation, the whole pipeline of how do we work within this world that is so far away from what we expect and expected, and yet it exists with all these troubles. Ayeka comes from ech. It's not about the what, it's about the how. How do we go about this world? And what is our responsibility? To see or not to see, to say or not to say. Bereshit Genesis starts with darkness. But God refuses to this arrangement of living in the darkness. For himself and for all of us. Yehi Or is the balagan of God himself, herself. And our world is the result of this intervention balagan. Vayhi Erev comes from lehit arev. And it's difficult, it's dark, shadows, but you have to intervene. And since then, the Torah tells us the story of those who do intervene and interfere and question about it and about themselves and find it difficult to decide. Those who stand at that junction of darkness and light, between darkness and light, with darkness and with light, asking themselves to see or not to see, to say or not to say, to intervene or not, in the most tremblings of time. It's never in the right time. It's always in the wrong time. This too, this corona time, is a trembling time. And we could say, no, not now. Now is the time for leaders to calm everyone, to comfort everyone, and themselves and their families. But it is now that we finally see together, through the epidemic, other epidemics of poverty, extreme poverty, and gaps. Elderly people and their situation in the world, racism, gender violence, gaps, heaps of wounds, collective wounds, generation upon generation. And it is now due to the corona that we take time, collectively, like we never did before, to ask about healing, to beware, to be cautious, and to ask what is needed so that we can heal. And it is now that we can decide together how to heal, what needs to change. Because it is now that we see how much we need each other, how we are dependent on each other, and we have more empathy towards each other. Now is the best time to see. Sometimes I even think that the masks help us to see. 13 million people are sick in our human family. More than 500,000 died. There is no better time to do a checkup for humanity, our humanity, and our private humanity, my humanity, than now. A time of global human hitbodedut, solitude. We're now in hitbodedut. Maybe finally, we're now in hitbodedut. And we can finally stop for a moment the craziness of achievements, of success, and just not succeed, and ask where we fail. Our responsibility is to find calmness and to find it in a way that gives us strength, but also to ask, how will we heal? What is needed so that we heal? What intervention is needed in our lives and in the lives of the human family and our societies? When all trembles, how should I as a leader comfort and be comforted? And how should I as a leader call and be called to action, to repair, to do tshuva? Because it shouldn't be either or, either consoling and comforting or calming or calling out. I believe with all my might that it isn't either or. It's never either or. It's gam vegam. Every night I put our youngest daughter, Be'eri, to bed here in Yerushalayim, our city where we live. And I sing to her a soft lullaby. And this world needs soft lullabies. It needs softness and gentleness and tenderness and breath and modesty of doing what we can. But it also needs us to do what we can. So after she falls asleep, I stand up and I face my dilemmas. What meaning will I give to this time? What will I choose to see? What are things that I have not wanted to see, blind spots? And what is our role as Jewish leaders of all sorts, learning Torah tonight in it? I know that those who sit here are the ones to see, are the ones to say and to do, and also to soothe. I also know how difficult it is to do both together, day after day, for such a long time, when all of us are in such insecurity. And so what I want to do today is to send a chizuk, a strengthening breath, for the journey that awaits us, an ancient journey of healing that started through intervention here in the city of Jerusalem. Let's start. So I'm now in Genesis 14. And with a first and even a second glance at this story that we're now going to look at, it seems really unimportant. What does it matter, really? There's a war between 4 and 5 kingships. It's a time where lots of kings are in this area. Each one of them wants his own power, his own city. And at first, Avram, who is still Avram and not Avraham yet, has nothing to do with this war. But after the king of Sodom, is defeated and Lot, the nephew of Avram, is captured, Avram goes out to war and he succeeds. And these are the last psukim, the last verses, when Avram comes back from defeating Kedar LaOmer. And this is what it says. I'm just at the very beginning. When he returned from defeating Kedar LaOmer, the king of Sodom came out to meet him, and the king Melchizedek of Shalem came out to meet him. He meets 2 kings. Now this is very bizarre. King Melchizedek of Shalem was never mentioned here before. He's mentioned here for the first time, 3, I think, verses. It's absolutely unnecessary. There's no need in that. The story could be perfect without the king Melchizedek of Shalem. So why is he here? Who put him here? How did he suddenly burst into our stories? Let's see what both of them do that might give us an answer. King Melchizedek of Shalem brought out bread and wine. We see something about the way he treats possession. He has abundance, he has bread and wine and blessings, and he gives them, and he wants nothing in return. Opposite to him, the king of Sodom says to Abraham, give me the persons and take the possessions. He's trading people with possessions as if they were equal. It doesn't really matter if he's taking the people and giving the possessions. They're the same. He's trading everything as merchandise. And Abraham sees that. And it's very interesting because Abraham doesn't stand and say, you will not speak that way. He knows how to speak both languages. And the Torah says that to us. He knows how to appreciate Melchizedek's offerings, generous offerings. He knows how to give him back something generous from himself when no one asked for anything from the other, only gave. And he also knows how to say to Melchizedek, to the king of Sodom, I don't want to really negotiate with you. I'll just take my loss, the loss of my people. Not more than that. He knows how to speak that language. And the Torah gives us those psukim in order to show us something about the situation to which Abraham arrives when he's here in the land of Canaan, back then, of Eretz Israel. of the paradigms in which he is. These are the civilizations in which Avraham resides. One of them is very generous and the other is very, very ungenerous. But you know what? It might be not that terrible. Avraham doesn't know maybe who exactly the king of Sodom is. He's not a resident in Sodom. His nephew is. But he knows how to speak the language. And sure enough, many of us do know how to speak the languages. Many of us know how to speak English, Hebrew, maybe some Yiddish, maybe Arabic, all kinds of languages, and Zumic now that we speak. It's okay to speak a few languages. It's being moderate. Avraham is moderate. He doesn't need to choose a side, at least not yet. And we're a pluralistic people, and so is Avraham. He's a pleasant person, at least in that moment. And lots of leaders do that because this is part of culture. Part of culture is being open and being moderate and being able to withhold different options despite the fact that I don't agree with some of them. So why not speak Sodomic when the king of Sodom speaks with me in his language? It really might not be that terrible. In text number 2, Rav Nehorai says in the Tosefta, you have no city more moderate than the Sodomites. The Sodomites are actually nice, cultural, moderate people. They don't mind anyone's business, which seems like something good. I don't need to mind your business. You don't need to mind my business. We could live like that. And maybe it's actually very respectful even to live like that. And he's not the only one. Rabbi Nehorai. Rav Isi says in Genesis Rabbah, there was no city in the plain better than Sodom. It was a beautiful city. It was civilization. It was New York. It was Paris. It was Yerushalayim. It was, think of any beautiful city in the world. For Lot searched through all the cities of the plain and found none like Sodom. Thus, those people were the best of all. These were cultural people. These were good people. They were perceived as the culture. They were so perceived as culture that even our ancestors, when they define different characters of people in Tractate Avot, give it as an option to be a Sodomite. And they say, in number 4, there are 4 types of characters of human beings. One that says mine and ma is mine, and yours. And this is a commonplace type, and some say that this is the Sodom type of character. Even our ancestors say that it's not that bad. It's even confusing, because if it's cultural and everyone are like that, why shouldn't I be? Maybe they know something about the way economy works better. And maybe it's better for everyone if I take care of my things and you take care of yours. Maybe responsibility is a key here. And maybe if I'm responsible for my things and you're responsible for yours, and we really create that differentiation, life could be much better. Each one of us takes responsibility on his life. That's civilization. The only thing is, there's a soundtrack of Sodom that teaches us the Torah. And the soundtrack of Sodom is a yell. There's a yell. Underneath that culture, there's a layer of yell. No one hears that layer of yell besides God, besides Hashem. Then the Lord said, the outrage of Sodom and Gomorrah, Sodom ve'Amorah, is so great, and their sin is so grave, I will go down to see whether they have acted altogether according to the outcry that has reached me. There's an outcry, and it reaches God, and God hears. Now I want to see what's behind that soundtrack. What is it? What happened in Sodom that I can't see from the outside? What is happening there? Number 6, we're now going to see 4 stories of 4 little vignettes of things that happen in Sodom. The first, in the name of Rabbi Levi in Genesis Rabbah. It happened that 2 damsels, young ladies, went down to draw water from a well. Said one to the other, why are you so pale? We have no more food left and are ready to die. Uchvar anu lamut, we're about to die. Replied she. What did she do? She filled her pitcher with flour and they exchanged their pitchers. One of them gave the other what she could, each taking the other's. When the Sodomites discovered this, they took and burnt her. So here is intervention, the most basic intervention. The first thing is, I see your face. She saw the face of the woman she was going to with the pitchers of the water. The second thing is she asked a question. She said, Lama. Why? She asked her. She could have not seen her. She could have not asked her. And she did both. And the third thing is she gave her something of herself. And this is spontaneous. She didn't know anything. She didn't have time to plan. And we see here how people are able in difficult moments to just be humane, to see, to ask, to give. First story. Now let's go to the second story. I want to say that it's very clear in this story that no one yells. But there's an unyelled yell that God hears in this story. And he says, I cannot not hear this voice. I hear it. I hear the scream in the complete silence of this beautiful culture of the most beautiful cities. Rabbi Yehuda says in Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, another story, they made a proclamation in Sodom. Everyone who strengthens the hands of the poor or the needy with a loaf of bread shall be burnt. Fire. Peletit, the daughter of Lot, was wedded to one of the magnates of Sodom. She saw a certain very poor man in the streets of the city, and her soul was grieved on his account. Every day, when she went out to draw water, she put in her bucket all sorts of provisions from her home, and she fed that poor man. And the men of Sodom said, how does this poor man live, actually? When they ascertained the facts, they brought her forth to be burnt by fire. And she said, Sovereign of all worlds, maintain my right and my cause at the hands of these men of Sodom. And her cry ascended before the throne of glory. So here we hear the cry. Here we know what the cry of that Hashem, that God heard was. And once again, water. It's very interesting. Water is our tears when we cry. It's the emotion. It's our compassion. So it's so beautiful how the whole story is around water. And of course, the people of Sodom burn each one of them, and they will be burnt themselves at the very end. Once again, we see someone who notices, like the story before, and this time she plans it. She plans it ahead. She knows that she wants to give him, and she does it, maybe even on a regular basis. It says, Bechol Yom. And this time there is a cry. So once again, we see another story of another possibility of not being able to give. Another story. Midrash Agadah, number 8. Once there was a poor person who was dying in famine. He's dying. Lot had a daughter whose name was Kala. And she was going to draw water from the well. And she would put bread in her jug and bring it to the poor person. The men of Sodom said, where is this poor person getting his sustenance? They investigated. They were really good investigators and discovered that Lot's daughter was providing for them. What did they do? They came and stripped her naked and covered her in honey, such that bees and flies came to devour the honey and bit her until she died. Now, the first thing I want to ask all of you, if you could write it maybe, or you want to write it in the questions and answers, just so we see what is common and similar in all of them, because it's so obvious, at least to me. I'm sure I'm not the only one, and you saw it way before me. All of them are women. All of them are women. And at least 2 of them are daughters of Lot, Peletit and Kala. Now we learned something about the house of Lot, by the way, and we learned something about the sisters of the daughters of Lot, who might have maybe lost their most righteous sisters. What a trauma. And maybe now we can understand better how our sages understood the daughters of Lot and with what compassion they saw their compassion. But there are many other things that we can see here, besides the fact that there are women. We also see that there is abundance in Sodom, alongside the fact that there are people who have nothing to eat and die of famine. There's a lot of food that could be given. And we also see that there's a lot of honey. And we also learned that there's no problem using that honey to give it, but not to people, to give it to bees. And even putting it on that poor Kala girl. And seeing her in a grotesque kind of picture, being eaten because she gave someone poor something to eat. What a terrible picture. We learn here that Sodom is a school for indifference. Sodom trains the people in that city to be indifferent. You are supposed not to take care of anyone else but yourself. Sheli, sheli, Shelcha, shelcha. What is mine is mine. What is yours is yours. And as Rav Yitzchak Arames, the Baal Akedat Yitzchak says, it becomes more than just, a character. That's the law of Sdom. You are not allowed to feel any empathy towards anyone. Nothing. You're not allowed to feel. You are allowed to do something or feel something when someone else feels, and he's wrong about it. So those leaders of Sdom are allowed to come out of their apathy when someone else came out of their apathy in the wrong way, of course, in their eyes. And also, they know that there are poor people, but you're not allowed to tend these poor people. So up to now, we see that Sdom actually deactivates the muscle of empathy, kills the muscle of empathy. It does euthanasia to kindness. There is no place for kindness in Sdom. And every person takes care of himself. Now look at the next story, which will take us even a step further on. And that comes from Sefer Yashar, that comes from the Middle Ages, from Yemei HaBeinaim. And they had in their land a very spacious valley, and it was supplied with springs of water and with rich vegetation around the water. And all the people of Sodom and Gomorrah assembled there for 4 days every year. They and their wives and children and all their belongings unto them. Everyone comes. And they rejoiced there with music and dancing. What a beautiful celebration. And in the midst of their jollification, of their party, they would rise one and all and take hold upon the wives of their neighbors and their virgin maidens and enjoy their company. And then they returned them again. And they saw their wives and daughters in the hands of other men, yet they would not say one word. So they carried it from morning to evening. And then they returned every man to his house and every woman to her tent. And that festival lasted 4 days every year. Now, this is much more than that, because this takes apathy and indifference much deeper. This means that the person I love the most, I must not care about. The person who I live with, the person whom I love, I see him suffering. I see someone treating him as merchandise, yet I have no ability, and it's absolutely not allowed. On the contrary, this is the celebration. The celebration is, I don't care. The celebration is, do whatever you want. The celebration shows how deep the apathy of human beings could go. Sdom is an exemplar for how deep human apathy could be. And it could be deep in the name of culture. And what kind of a counterculture you need to stand in front of a city like Sdom. I want to say something about the word adish. Adish, which means apathic, indifferent, is the opposite of kadosh. Kadosh means that I turn something into the most precious thing for me. I give it all I have. I will guard it. I will never allow to use it. I will not look at it as an instrument. It's how I look at people, at humans. Adish is to do all the opposite. Sdom is the city, the capital of Adishut. And there's no real fight against it because it's culture. Now let's see what another culture could be. Melchizedek, the king of Shalem, he brought wine and bread despite not having any stake in the matter, says Rab Shimshon Raphael Hirsch. Now we come back to Melchizedek Melech Shalem, and Shimshon Raphael Hirsch in the 19th century understands that Melchizedek is creating a counterculture. His actions, he says in line number 5, his actions has nothing to do with the king of Sodom. He acted by virtue of his position as priest of the God of justice and humanity. He has his own way. Sodom worshipped a different God, one with no interest in righteousness or humanity. Humanity and egoism were both divine in the name of Sodom. So the king of Melchizedek, it says hotzi, he takes out in the public. He gives Avram things to eat, to drink, blesses him. He knows what he's doing. He's actually fighting over the attention of Avraham. He wants Avraham to choose. He thinks Avraham should choose between Sodom and Shalem, between Sodom and tzedek, Ira Tzedek, the city of righteousness and of justice. And apparently, according at least to Rabbi David Kimchi, he was not the only king to be called Melchizedek in Jerusalem. It was a long lineage of kings who were all called Melchizedek. Number 11, it was customary to give the title Melchizedek to the kings of Jerusalem. So he comes from a lineage. So I want to ask now, who is Melchizedek? And how is it that he has the guts and the courage, this little tiny king, priest of God, who has the guts to stand against the culture of Sodom, the most beautiful city in the area? According to our tradition, Melchizedek is one of the sons of Noach from the flood, who saw humanity at its worst. He is Shem. According to our tradition, Noach had 3 sons, Shem, Cham, V'Yefet. And Cham was a son that saw his father with no clothes after being devastated from the whole Mabul, who wouldn't be? Being the only survivor with his family after having such a responsibility and becoming, drinking. And eventually, when Noach takes off his clothes, Cham sees him and he just doesn't mind, he doesn't care. The sons of Cham will be Sodom. The sons of Shem will be Melchizedek. According to some of the researchers on it, Rav Yehuda Leib Goldberg and Professor David Shayovitz, Sodom was in the area designated to Cham, and Shalem, Ira Tzedek, the city of justice, was in the area designated to Shem. And so these are lineages teaching their children how to be. While Shem cannot see his father without clothes, and together with Yefet he covers him, he can't be indifferent. His children and his city can't be a city of indifference. And while Cham exercised indifference with his own father, the city of Sodom could actually become from a family to a culture. The question is, who is Avraham? And what will Avraham choose? Because he could choose both. That's an interesting question. And if you skip forward, you'll see that Avraham in chapter 18 of Genesis, of Bereshit, will decide to host the Orchim, the Malachim, the angels who come and visit him, the visitors, which he doesn't know. And it's very clear that it's very important for the Torah to say how open his house is. And that's part of the blessing and part of the ability to receive a son, to be an educator. And after that, not a long time after that, just after that, he goes to Sodom and he hears that Sodom will be ruined, will be destroyed. And he yells and screams and fights against God because that's the person he is. He cannot be indifferent. He will not be indifferent. He will not be indifferent about those people who will absolutely be indifferent about him. But he can't. And he can't stop God. And the city is destroyed. And now there's a vacuum. Sodom is destroyed. What should happen now? What should happen now, according to Rav Mordechai Breuer, is to build an alternative city to Sodom. And the alternative city will be a city of intervention. It will be the city of Yerushalayim, of Jerusalem. I just want to say that city is a really important thing in the Torah. And it's the Torah is very concerned about cities because it knows that eventually that's where culture is created. The first to create a city was Cain. Vayehi boneh ir. He never finished building the city. And then you see the city with the people of Migdal Bavel, of the Babylonian Migdal, with their very, very top, huge building. And slowly you see how Yerushalayim will take all these missions and build a city and also build a tower. The very same language of these cities will be repaired in the language of the city of Yerushalayim. That's why we say, unlike Cain, boneh ir, we say the bracha, the blessing, boneh Yerushalayim. And we can never finish building it because that's exactly our mission. That will happen in chapter number 22, when Avraham will go to sacrifice his son. Now, this is a fundamentally difficult story. It's not an easy story. It's never an easy story. That's why I chose it. But I didn't choose it. The Torah chose it. And I want to offer a reading that explains what Jerusalem is, what it was supposed to be. because it's unspeakable and unacceptable what Avraham agrees to. He agrees to ignore the pain of his own son, of Yitzchak, for the purpose of the divine. Think about it. For a moment, Avraham is almost Sdomi. It's as if God is tempting him and telling him, let's see what happens to you when I tell you what to do. Will you accept this kind of a culture? We know many people who accept that in the name of God, cruelty could happen in the world. And God is checking Avraham. And then happens the most incredible thing. Because in the midst of all this, and this is not happening at the beginning of the life of Avraham. This is happening according to the Midrash when he's 137, because Yitzchak was born when he was 100, and according to the Midrash, Yitzchak is 37 when the Akedah happened. So let's say he is absolutely not at the beginning of his life. He is a mature person who is standing in the midst of cultural, ethical questions. And he needs to decide, and he goes. And he goes, he's tempted to go, to become Sdomite. As if he says, okay, there's one place in which I'll be Sdomite. Maybe every one of us, somewhere around life, has to just agree and give up and say, you know what, this is culture. And then an angel, verse 11, and the Lord calls to him from heaven and says, Avraham, Avraham. And he answers, here I am. And he says, do not raise your hand against this boy or do anything for him. For now I know that you fear God. When Avraham looked up, his eye fell upon a ram, and he caught on the thicket on his horns. And Avraham went and took that ram and offered it up and burnt it. And Avraham named that place Adonai Yireh. So what happens now, according to the Midrash too, is intervention, massive intervention, from below and from above. According to the Midrash in Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, all the angels of the world are screaming. And according to the Midrash, the ram is screaming. I want you to look for a moment, if you may, at number 13. And it says, Avraham lifted up his eyes. Finally, he is lifting up his eyes. He's not blind. He cannot be blind. Being blind cannot be a person of belief in God. It cannot be that. He opens his eyes finally. And he sees a ram, and this ram is caught. And he puts forth his leg, this ram, and takes hold of the coat of our father Avraham. He intervenes. And Avraham looks and sees that ram, and he went and sends him free. He doesn't even understand. He still needs to understand what's happening. So look how there is such intervention of the ram according to the Midrash, and of these angels according to the Midrash, and according to the Torah that screams, Lo chasachta et bincha. You did not that you did not withhold your son. I want to give another pirush for this because this is very problematic. A beautiful pirush of Sefer Maaseh Hashem of Rabbi Eliezer Ashkenazi HaRofeh. He says you should not read Lo chasachta et bincha, but Lo chashachta et bincha. You did not agree to give your son to darkness, the darkness of Sodom. You understood something and you took a side. Yan asher lo chashachta et bincha. So does the Sfat Emet say. Many, many times throughout this story is the word hamakom. That word, hamakom, the place, also appears in Sodom. In Sodom, they leave hamakom. They go out of the makom. And here they see. This is the makom of seeing. This is the place of seeing intervention and understanding that intervention, seeing and intervention will make a city of justice. And this indeed is the name of Yerushalayim according to the Midrash. Avraham gave the name Yireh, and Melchizedek gave the name Shalem. And both of them brought what they understood and their choices, their cultural, moral, ethical choices to found a city. The story of Akedat Yitzchak, of the binding of Yitzchak, is not a story about Yitzchak. The story of Akedat Yitzchak is the story of founding a city, a capital city of empathy, a capital city of seeing, of saying, of intervening, of justice, a capital city that would stand against other possibilities and fight against other possibilities in the name of a father who nearly fell in the very same place that the people of Sodom fell. I want to say about this city that, as I said, it's a very, very important place. And it's such an important place that this is why it becomes such a devastating place. You know, Baal Shem Tov says that every time we call with a shofar on Rosh Hashanah and at the end of Yom Kippur, we actually we stand on a very high migdal as if we were standing in the mikdash, in the holiness. And we yell, we care. We care. We care about ourselves. We care about others. We say we are that ram. And the mikdash, the soundtrack of Bet HaMikdash, of the Temple Mount of Israel, the only soundtrack was B'chatzotzrot v'kol shofar, was the sound of shofar. That is the soundtrack of that ram. And that's why it is so devastating to see what happens when we move to Ishayahu, to Isaiah, and to Eicha, to Lamentations. The Zohar says, Sdom achot liYerushalayim. Sdom is the sister of Jerusalem. They're like two opposites. Like many times people do that to their children, which all of us, I think, I hope, I believe, she is like this, she's like that. He is like this, he's like that, though there are differences and uniquenesses. But here what happens is the most worst thing, because what happens is that Jerusalem becomes Sdom. Jerusalem becomes Sdom. She became that very thing that she was supposed to stand against. She became that very thing that she was supposed to exemplar, something so different. And Chachamim say, Rabbi Yochanan said, she was worse than Sdom. And see what the words of Ishayahu, I don't need to say anything. He says, hear the words of the Lord. You chieftains of Sdom, give ear to our God's instruction. You folk of Gemara, he calls the people of Yerushalayim, Sdom ve'Amorah. You are leaders of Sdom ve'Amorah. I am sated with burnt offering of rams. Why does he say rams? Because there was one ram. What did you make out of it? You made out of it pulchan. You made out of it, just the worship, the ritual. The ritual. You made it a city of ritual, like any culture. But it has nothing. It has no meaning. It's even worse. You rebuilt Sdom in Jerusalem. What could be worse than that? And in Eichan, Lamentation, they say the same thing. Her leaders were like rams, I think it should say, Ka'ayalim, that found no pasture. And the guilt of my poor people exceeded the antiquity of Sdom. It's terrible. She is there instead of Sdom. Sdom was the place where people and maybe humanity was sacrificed. The humanity of humanity was sacrificed. And Yerushalayim was supposed to be the place where we save the humanity. How terrible it is when Yerushalayim becomes Sdom. When Yerushalayim and the people of Yerushalayim, as a metaphor, as a myth, allow to build Sdom in Yerushalayim. Many times we speak about Ir, about the word Ir HaKodesh. We say the city, the holy city. And we spoke about holy, Kadosh, unlike an opposite to Adish. But I want to say something about the word Ir, and that's why I also made it in bold and big, so you can see it in page number 9 in your pages. Ir. I wanted to say that Ir is a very important place in the Torah. It's a place where we could fight for civilization and how economy and society could look like. Ir comes from the word awake. When we're awake, it's busy, because it's not only my family, it's other families that meet each other, and people change, and people come in and people go, and it's big, and it's impossible. How can you even take care of it? But that's the most we can do to take care of a city, maybe. Ir also comes from arev, to vouch for the other, to be in solidarity with the other. Me'orav, to know that in order to be arev, you have to be part of what happens. You have to be involved. And you can't do hitarvut. You can't do any kind of interference without being there. Actually being there, awake and involved and in solidarity. I also would like to say that if you flip around the two letters of Ir, Ain, Reish, you receive the word Ra, bad, evil. What happens to lots of people when they come together? Will they do evil? Will they do good? Will they create a culture? And what culture would that be? Not every culture is a good one. Some of them are false ones, and some of them are very, very dangerous. And we, the daughters and sons of Abraham and Sarah, we should be able to identify that and to stand against that and to build Yerushalayim. When you put in the yud into the ra, into the evil, you receive rea, friendship. Friendship is the highest form of solidarity. The ir could be a place for re'ut, for friendship, for solidarity. I want to start closing by saying that the city of Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh, should be a culture of friendship, a culture of solidarity that sees, that says, that speaks, that takes responsibility by taking responsibility not only for me, but for the person next to me, for us. Yerushalayim is always in the plural, like enaim, eyes, oznaim, ears. So say Rabbeinu Bachya ibn Pakuda, so says Rabbi Yehuda Amichai, the Israeli poet. Yerushalayim is in the plural. It speaks of a possibility of creating a culture of the plural that has intimate relationship of friends. And now I want to see what the mitzvah of Yerushalayim is. So if you look at the mitzvah of coming up, pilgrimaging, making pilgrimage to Yerushalayim, in the very private realm of me and my family, I think you'll see something very beautiful. It says in Hebrew, 3 פעמים בשנה יראה כל זכוריך את פני השם אלוהיך במקום אשר יבחר. 3 times a year, all your children, I would say children, should appear before the Lord your God in that place. And I think it's so clear and so beautiful that the God who would not in any way and in any form ask Avraham to sacrifice his child in the name of any kind of belief or faith or tradition, wants to make sure to say to his people, I want to see your children. I want to see all your children. 3 times a year. I want to know they're safe. I want to know you take care of them. I want to know you start by taking care of your own families. I'm saying this to all of us, especially rabbis and lay leaders who take care of so many other people. 3 times a year, says God, I want to see you with your family going up to Yerushalayim. It's so beautiful that Bet Hillel say in Mechilta de Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai that any child who can hold the hand of his father is entitled to go up and do that mitzvah. Just like Yitzchak, who was able, either he was 3 or 37, he was entitled to walk up with his father. So this is a mitzvah making sure that we understand that no one child of our families should be sacrificed in Jerusalem for the sake of faith, or any other place for the sake of faith. God makes sure of that through the mitzvah of making pilgrimage with our children and with all 3 times a year. And of course, he uses the very same words. Yera'eh, seen, b'makom, the place, my city. My city will be a place where we see the safety of all of us. But it's not only of all of us. And this is a beautiful midrash in Shir HaShirim, in the Song of Songs. It says in Shir HaShirim, Achot lanu ktana, v'shadayim en la, ma na'aseh la'achotenu. We have a little sister whose breasts are not yet formed. What shall we do for our sister? And who is that sister? Ask Chachamim. And they answer in number 19 in the Song of Songs, Zuta, Sdom and her daughters. She is part of our family. She might not take care of us, but we must take care of her. You can't do Ira Kodesh and say, sorry, Sdom, I'm not taking care of you. Sorry, this person, I'm not taking care of you. We need to take care of all of us. Shir HaShirim is about the wholeness of all, the richness of life, having so many trees and so many birds and so many everything. We are in charge of that everything to the very last. And so we need to take care of each other. And there's an understanding that we can't give up even on Sdom. And it's very, very beautiful because the answer of Chachamim is, how will we do it? We will do it ourselves. Ani choma. I will stand in the city of Sdom. I will go into the city of Sdom. Maybe going back to Lot and maybe looking kindly at Lot and at his wife and his daughters. Anachnu, we will do and settle down in all cities, in every city, not in Jerusalem only. This is the opposite of what Jerusalem wants. We will go to every city, to every place where humanity might choose Domic language, we will be there. And we will have a minyan there. And we will raise our children there. And we will do the mitzvah of seeing each other there. And we will do the mitzvah of making good deeds there. And we will send lights from each other, from that torch of Torah and of prayer and of breath and of the doves to each other to make sure that any place that people gather, we vouch for each other. Let us be nir'im, let us be seen everywhere we are. And let that Torah be seen everywhere we live. And the last one, of course, is the very, very last paragraph of the very last text in number 22, which is the mitzvah I love the most. I can't get rid of loving this mitzvah for years. I think for 20 years I've been saying this, and I apologize for those who heard it again and again. The mitzvah of Hashavat Avedav, returning lost property. If you see your fellow's ox or sheep gone astray, do not ignore it. You must take it back to your fellow. If your fellow does not live near you, maybe you're really far away, you don't know who he is, you don't even know him, you shall bring it home and it shall remain with you until your fellow claims it. Then you shall give it back to him. You shall do the same with his ass and with his garment, and so too with anything that your fellow loses. You must not remain indifferent. Lo tuchal lit'alem. You must not remain indifferent. Lo tuchal lit'alem. And the Torah teaches us in the most clear way that we are in charge of all the lost and founds of this world. And you know, the lost and found of this world are not only a set of keys in my neighborhood. They are faith, their hope, their justice. These are the lost and found of our world. And we lose them all the time. And we are in charge of finding them back. And in a dialogue, because this is the most dialogic mitzvah of the Torah. It's not that I lose and I found. It's that I lose and you find. You lose and I found. It could be amongst nations and cultures. We help each other to lose, and then we help each other to find. Lo tuchal hit'alem. Hit'alem is the opposite of olam. Olam is the action. Hit'alem is when we give up and surrender to Sdom. We learned so many things, I hope. But I hope that the most important thing that I want to leave here for at least a moment is that many times we speak about the kotel, the avanim of the kotel, the stones of the kotel. But there was one stone in Yerushalayim, the stone of claimants. And people stood at that stone and yelled, I lost, I found. They yelled to each other. I think we're doing the study of Torah from here, from Yerushalayim, to yell to each other that we're allowed to take this moment and give each other breath and calm, but also scream and yell and ask, what do we need to find because we lost it? In culture, in values, in so many ways. This is the stone of claimants here in Yerushalayim that I want to stand with, is to stand at. And from here to pray, and from here to learn, and to call all my fellow Jewish leaders, and all my fellow brothers and sisters of this world, not to give up, and to create another world. Yerushalayim is the categorical imperative of the Jewish people. She's a place, a tangible place, but she's also an international myth, a very, very needed one. She gives us tools for making a city of shalem, a city of wholeness, through holiness, standing against and opposing apathy and indifference. She gives us tools of feeling solidarity, of being involved, and of interfering. And every Shabbat evening, when we stand and rise and sing Lecha Dodi, and we look at the direction of Yerushalayim, when we say those words, Lecha Dodi, Likrat Kala, come my people, come my friends, come my partners, I'm going to Kala. When we say Kala, we say the name of that daughter of Lot, who had the courage to stand against the whole culture. One woman, and maybe many others alongside her. Likrat Kala, we go to her, we see her, Pnei Shabbat Nekabela, until we see a face, and we give a face to each other, to humanity, to all religions, to all creatures of this world. Toda Rabba. Thank you. I know Shraga is there, and I hope that we can take time for questions and thoughts of some of the friends who are here right now.
תודה רבה רבה, רבה תמר. זה היה כל כך מרגש. It was so moving, so beautiful and insightful. And I myself sat here and heard it with tears and a lot of thoughts. And there are many beautiful remarks that I cannot, of course, read all of them. A lot of people dedicated your learning, your session for people in need, for wives and spouses and men, husbands, and children, grandchildren, and of course for all their families. And thank you so much for that. And I wish our prayings in those tough days would do their activeness as well. There are, of course, some questions that are connected to the current challenges of the actual challenges of Jerusalem. Rabbi Cooper asked specifically, do you think that Jerusalem of today, Yerushalayim shel hayom, with its vast differences in wealth and power between Jewish and Palestinian people, is living up to being Ira and Shalem, the combination of this, and even more demanding, how can you return a metaphorical object, for example, empathy, justice, if the other doesn't realize that she lost the object and she's resistant to taking it back? So maybe, because you are also a Jerusalemite activist, may we hear you a little bit about current Jerusalem? Thank you.
Thank you, Shraga, and thank you, everyone, for sending these names. And thank you, Rabbi Cooper, for asking this question, because this is exactly the point. We cannot leave it aside. We have to make this relevant to our lives, and I thank you for making this relevant. Absolutely. Yerushalayim is the symbol of the Jewish people. Yerushalayim cannot be a normal city, and it must not be a city that does wrongs to anyone. I am very fortunate to be part of a community, the community of Zion here in Jerusalem, that takes very, very active actions to mend and to repair wrongdoings in the city of Jerusalem. Many things we do are just first on a very basic, level, just before anything, realizing that so many of us didn't have friends who come from other cultures or nations, Arabs, whether Muslims or Christians, and just beginning by saying that this is our mitzvah, the mitzvah v'chnasat orchim of our fellow neighbors. The Shekhinah comes from Shechen, first our neighbors. And we invited each other. Many of us, including me, in our community, learn Arabic. And many of us are involved, including me, in many of the very big battles in the city and in general, especially in this time. I have to say that I'm taking this moment, I feel like it's like a vidui, in this moment, that I never feel it's enough. It's a very, very long journey. But I know that for me living in Jerusalem, and I know that having Tzion means mitzuyanut, it means human aspiring to the human perfection of behavior, is a very, very long journey and a very long route. I want to say on a political, in the political realm, that to me it's very clear. To me it's very, very clear. It's been clear, I think, as a child who was born in Yerushalayim. We have come to create a very unique city in this place called Ir HaKodesh Yerushalayim. We have come to this place to create a shared city, a city that does not belong to us. We belong to it. This city will be slowly, I hope, creating itself and transforming itself together with all people who live here into a shared city, a holy city, where people have the most basic, fundamental needs, all of them, when they're treated with dignity, all of them, when there's a place for their voice and their culture and their religion, all of them. And all of that resides side by side. I want to say that I did not make this up. Our prophets made this up. And Melchizedek and Avraham made this up. But also Herzl, writing Zionism, made this up. And when he writes his book, Alt Neuland, he really says the story of Jerusalem. And in his book, the story of Jerusalem is the story of a city with all these people working so hard. And when he enters in the story, the city of Jerusalem, he sees them side by side. And they, the different religions, have different houses all around Jerusalem of kindness and of food and shelter. And they take care and tend the world and the healing of the sick of the world together. And that's what I hope for the city of Jerusalem. I hope for the city of Jerusalem that Zion, our community, alongside institution like Hartman Institution and others, will slowly create a city that is a city that in its very system, exemplar that ability of living in the city of God. If the city of Jerusalem is the capital of the state of Israel, it must be a capital that speaks Kodesh. And then it must be a capital that has place for all and that belongs to no one, only to God, only to the divine. And if you ask me, this is what we Jews have come to do. We have come to build our place, our home, which we're entitled to have as any other, alongside another home that other nations, as the Palestinians, are entitled to have, just like us next to us. And the Jews have come back to their homeland to show themselves and to show the world what Jewish tradition is all about. The city of Jerusalem is a very, very Jewish city. And it's also a very, very cosmopolitic, international city. And it should be the highest leadership form of Tzionut. I feel today that Tzionut needs Jerusalem, that we should come back to Jerusalem. And every person who is Tzioni, and I'm Tzionit, and the name of our congregation is Tzion, should say 3 times a day, I will not forget you, Jerusalem, and I will walk with you in the name of you, in our country, in the state of Israel, with Zionism, to make what Zionism was supposed to be, a shelter not only for the Jews, but a shelter for humankind.
Thank you so much, and you demonstrate it in your activities as well. You have talked about the need of creating a counterculture, and you elaborated a little bit about this, and I am coming back to Sodom following the questions, and some people are asking, how do you get the courage to stand in Eranut, as you said, not to be bad, but to be good, to be not to be Ra, but to be Er. They are coming back to Sodom and they see the women there, and they ask themselves, did they know that they are going to be punished according to the Sodom law because of helping the others, hearing their cries and yells? So how do you move people? How do you push people? How do you push yourself to stand against and not just to be a bystander?
Thank you very much for this question, because this is a question I ask myself every day, so many times a day. I want to say that it's very, very difficult and it's very, very frightening, and you have to be courageous because it's one time after the other. Culture is a huge, massive thing. It has economical structures. It has standing across it is really standing with a little, pitch of water. And I think what helps us is the one face of that one person that we meet that changes our life. It could be that woman that I saw who stood there in fear across the man that she was afraid of. It could be a very, very poor person. It could be someone who went through terrible injustice. I think it has to be human. It has to start from the human connection. Otherwise, we also use the other's situation in order to create a culture. And this is not about that at all. It's about really seeing, and it's really, really about caring. But I want to say something also about about how to stay how to stay awake. And do we know we're going to be punished? The answer is yes. We have to know that we will pay prices for standing and giving a counter culture. All of us pay prices. Jews have paid prices for so many generations. Our grandparents knew that forever. But we too, in this generation, need to prepare ourselves to pay prices. Prices that are economic, prices that are regarding ecology. We need to be able to pay prices, serious prices, in order to fix the world, and also personal prices. Many of us, many times, the most natural thing is to want to be accepted in culture. Many leaders who become leaders of a culture are loved by the people. What happens when you are the very same person who was chosen to be the spokesman of culture, and it has to change? I think rabbis do that for generations. I'm sure all the leaders and all the rabbis or different kinds of leaders in this conversation and in this study know exactly how it feels. It's very lonely, and it's paying many, many prices. And we have to be ready to pay those prices in the coming time, as long as it comes together with Boneh Yerushalayim, with building. Because I think that in general, interrupting the order is something that many times, many different people in the order are afraid of. Those who need the order, otherwise they have nothing. Those who feel that without it, they will have nothing. Those who use the order. In order to interrupt the order, we need to know that we will pay prices, and we need to build. Rabbis and leaders cannot be destructive powers. We cannot be destructive leadership. It's not about ruining our culture. It's about building it right. So many things in the basis of culture are beautiful in the world in which we live, and they are the assets of our humanity. And yet we need to make sure that we have the ability and the courage to look into the eyes of those places that are wrong and to say, you know what? I'm part of something that is really wrong, and I need to fix it. And I don't know how. And it doesn't mean annulling everything I know, but it does mean taking the time to learn how to fix it. We are now learning how to be heart surgeons. And it's a very, very difficult task for a doctor who before that, saw maybe things from the outside. Some of us maybe were doctors of the soul and of the spirit. And now we have to very, very, very closely learn the the ayeka, the how, the ayeka, where are you, of the structure of our civilization. And we need to learn it and to map it and to learn from other people, from other professions. And we need to learn slowly what our role as education leaders and as spiritual leaders will be in changing the tradition. And I think the beauty is that we are able to be partners, real partners in that change and in that tshuva, in that repentance. Because we deal not only with private people, but we deal with the public. And we really, really have the ability and the accessibility to public opinion in the Jewish world. So we have the ability to influence, and we have the responsibility not to destroy, but to build.
Thank you so much, V'amen. I want to quote my Rabbi Marcelo Polakov, who says or ask, what about this question of the virtue of moderation? Why is this negative approach related to Sodom when we usually value it as a positive moral virtue?
Thank you very much to Rabbi Marcelo. I ask myself the same question, but I want to tell you something I learned about Sodom, Tzedek, and Sodom. Sodom comes from Sad. It's putting everyone in the very same place. You can't move. And Tzedek comes from Tzad. You take a stand. Even if all the world is in one side and the other's on the other side, you come out of yourself. and you take a step towards another side, you exceed yourself, and you take a step to another place. I think moderation is a beautiful form when it's something that also pays a price. Moderation that doesn't pay a price, moderation that actually participates in leaving the same order while you know that this order is full of wrongdoings, is not a value. What is a value, I think, in moderation, at least to me, is pace. I believe many times that this is one of the reasons that Shabbat says to us, Lecha dodi likrat kala. It says to us, this is moderation. It's not going to happen in one time. It's even not going to happen in one generation. Moderation is that I come every time, over and over again on Shabbat, and I see her, and I go to her direction of Kala, and I see her coming to my direction, and we don't meet yet. And every time I come again, and I say, remember, I'm here. And I see her coming to us, and everyone rises up in honor and in dignity of what she did then and what she does now everywhere. But we know it will take time. I think the moderation part is the part of savlanut, of the possibility of sevel, of really suffering, of the time and of the process that it takes to heal the world. I want to say one last thing about moderation, metinut, is that metinut also comes from giving. I think many times, latet, many times when we want to fix the world, we feel that we know how to do it, that we are going to be the saviors of the world. And I remember many, many years ago when I was a rabbi at Temple Israel Center, in one of our studies, I said to the people, I don't know if I believe in the Mashiach, one person who will do it. I absolutely believe in the Mashiach, in the time of the Mashiach, of conversating. And that will come. And we need a lot of patience in order to give each other permission to be leaders together in the field of healing the world. And we need to see each other and learn from each other. That's why Corona is so difficult on the one hand because we can't see the faces of each other, and so beautiful on the other because we do meet and study together. But I think the ability of metinut is the ability of remembering I will not do this alone. It's a collective thing of leaders. It's a collective thing of cultures. This is a collective moment of healing the world. And there is no redemption in the world by one or for one. Redemption in the world is metinut. It's only by doing it together, slowly, with patience, Shabbat after Shabbat, week after week.
Thanks again. And I'm really sorry that I can't hear all the questions and all the remarks, but I want to end up with one last question. As you are a Jerusalemite activist and also a great prayer, and I want to ask about the relationship between praying. I know that you are going to lead on Thursday night a huge prayer for the sake of the Rabbanut and the leaders, the spiritual leaders all around the Jewish world and maybe all around the world, generally from Jerusalem and from all around the world. And I want to, if you can, relate to those relationship between us as Jews praying and us as Jews doing.
Thank you for saying that. I want to say two things that will seem very opposite. One of them is that really prayer is also very modest. It's very humble. It says, I will do what I can, but I'm not alone here and I need your help, God. It believes in something that is beyond me. Prayer also makes space and makes room through God for people who are next to me, which I don't hear. Prayer is the opposite of Sdom. Prayer is the continent of exercising empathy. When I say in my prayer, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, I make room for people who came way before me and the children who will come way after me. V'techazena einenu. I make room for the people who are next to me, for their tzarot, for their concerns, for their dagot, for their problems. And I make room, I learn not to be in the middle of my life, to be part of my life, to be able to share life with other people. And I flip around the picture. Instead of it all being about me. I started off by standing and talking about me, but slowly I understood this is absolutely not about me. It's about the health of other people. Prayer is also sometimes, unlike Torah, taking a stand. That's why Jerusalem is a city of prayer. It takes a stand. Sometimes learning Torah is a privilege. Women came into the world of Torah, but it's sometimes a privilege because we sit and we think, and maybe this thing isn't not that's terrible, and we harmonize things. And we have the ability to sit in a room and hold on to values or to thoughts that we might not agree with. Prayer says you take a stand. You take a stand and you scream now. And what are you going to scream about? That's tzedek, that's sad, that's taking a side, that's taking a step, that's coming out of myself for the sake of something that is greater than myself. It could be God or through God, any other human being next to me. Prayer teaches us of the realm of Kodesh. Heschel taught that the biggest problem of civilization, of Western civilization, is that we looked for the virtue of the tov, of the good. But it's not about the good, because good is hierarchy. It's the etzadat tov v'ra, it's the tree of good and bad. We are looking for the kadosh, not the tov. The kadosh is beyond all that. It's the place in which I will never use the other person. Rather, I will take care of him and give him and hand him his dignity. Prayer is our form of protesting against what is wrong in this world. Every time we pray, we protest. Every time we pray in the city of Jerusalem, we do what the city of Jerusalem is supposed to be. I want to say that this is why we say, all the time, L'shana haba'a b'Yerushalayim habnuya. What does it mean, L'shana haba'a b'Yerushalayim habnuya? It's a prayer that says, as long as this world will not be led and will not be seen and perceived the way I see it, the way I believe it should be, the way our ancestors believe it should be, I will stand and pray, L'shana haba'a b'Yerushalayim habnuya. And I will know that there's another person through this Zoom, in another continent, in another, and another, and another, and another. And we will say this over and over and over again. And every time we say this, we protest against the world. And we also believe in this world enough to tell this world that it could be better. Prayer is our ability to hope through doing, to hope and build. And what I hope for all of us, from all my heart, is that we will all keep on taking that Yerushalayim in our hearts, in our actions, building these places and these cultures and structures, listening, doing it together, in partnership, in friendship, praying together here in Jerusalem, for Jerusalem in any place, and fixing and healing this world. May we see this world healed. May we take part in healing this world.
רק אומר אמן ומזמין את כולכם להצטרף ולומר אמן אמן גדול לדברים החשובים והנבואיים האלה של תמר. תמר, thank you so much for being with us for this kind of prophecy, of actual prophecy that we need so much for our generation. As Johnny Ariel put it so nicely, you comfort the troubled and trouble the comfortable. And לשנה הבאה בירושלים הבנויה. תודה רבה ולהתראות.
Amen.